Hey, everybody, before we get into this episode of The Space Between Your Ears, we got to talk one more time. Oh, yeah, I know the summer is winding down, but you know what else that means? I just recently saw my first commercial for 2022 car models. Yeah, that's right. It's that time of year. It's back to school, and it's back in the factory for all these car dealerships making out all these 2022 vehicles, which means if you're looking for a used vehicle, those 2021s are going to be coming used vehicles pretty soon, or they're just going to try to discount them all out to make room for the 2022s. But let's focus on the used vehicle end of it. Because right now, if you go to, I'd say 90% of dealerships, especially ones that are mom and pop dealerships, they'll willingly buy your used vehicle so they can turn around and sell it to somebody else. But they ain't going to have much of an inventory because of the COVID pandemic and just in general, car dealerships having a down last 18 months. So what are you going to do? You're going to check out Mohawk Honda. My friends over there on Freeman's Bridge Road in Scotia, Glenville, they're going to help you out because not only do they have the best certified pre-owned vehicles in the entire upstate New York area, they also have the largest inventory of certified pre-owned vehicles. And not only that, they're not just going to sell you whatever they think is going to help you out or the first thing that pops in on their computer when they're looking for vehicles for you. No, they're going to help you out. They'll let you test drive several vehicles if you want to. They'll let you get your significant other's involvement, your kids' involvement, because they want to make sure they give you a vehicle that fits your values and your lifestyle. So why not? I don't care if you're up in Lake George, Saratoga. I don't care if you're out in Syracuse, Watertown, down near New York City. Get to Scotia, Glenville. Visit our friends at Mohawk Honda, Freeman's Bridge Road, because selection is king this summer, and they'll always go out of their way to please you. Also, a quick reminder about our friends at Johnstone Supply, 2600 6th Avenue in Troy. I know we're getting towards the end of summer, but hey, you want to make sure all your HVAC needs are met. I know it's been humid, it's been rainy, it's going to get hot again next week. So you want to make sure you take care of things so it doesn't just hold over until next spring. And then you go, oh, yeah, I have a busted AC unit. Don't worry, get it done now. Fujitsu, Westinghouse, all kinds of models in stock from them. Or if you know that it's a contactor or a capacitor problem, no problem. They always have those parts in stock as well. Johnstown Supply in Troy, 2600 6th Avenue in Troy, 518-272-5922. And now that I'm done to sound like a used car salesman, welcome to The Space Between Your Ears, episode 13 here, presented by Godzilla Media, and as mentioned, sponsored by Mohawk Honda and Johnstone Supply. What the hell are you counting on your Oh, the number 13?
Number 13. This is the best podcast to be a guest on, actually.
Yeah, I figured this would be a good number for you, so that's half the reason I asked you. No, I'm kidding. It's about 10% of the reason I asked you. Anyway, you already heard the voice, and if you're watching the video on YouTube, then you've seen the face as well. That pretty little mug right there. This is a gentleman I've known since 2014, 2013. Yeah, well, 2013, actually. And our original backgrounds was we met through him being an indie wrestler, me being a fan, and then I became part of the indie wrestling business. And yeah, he's one of the best dudes all around, in and out of the ring. No, not much needs to be said. And he's a veteran of the U.S. Army. He's a local guy. He's a SUNY Adirondack graduate. We'll get into a whole bunch of stuff later. Mr. Dan Roberts, yeah, what's going on, man?
Thank you. That's one hell of an introduction. Thank you, Brian. 2013 is you're one of the few people that I still talk to from the wrestling business or who still likes me enough to say hi. So I guess I'm doing something right.
All right. So before we go back in time to before we met. Mm-hmm. Let me talk about how I don't know if we actually met during this time, but how I first came to know you. I'm going to give you 4 letters, and I just want to see your reaction to it. IYFW.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm not one of those guys that ever likes to shit on where I worked. I know some guys, they hear In Your Face Wrestling and they're like, oh, fuck that place. That place allowed me to kind of discover who I was. And more importantly than that, they allowed me to be an idiot. And I know that in this world of in the world of pro wrestling, everyone wants to be the tough guy. And I went out there in a Star Wars helmet, dancing like a rent a stripper at one show, and it's like I was there with my friend, and yeah, I liked that sweaty ass community center in Ballston Spa. Like it's still, I drive by it and I'm like, oh, I won my first tag titles there. You know, like I met good people there. Like, you know, yeah, some people like to remember the negatives, but I think that some people are just drawn to being negative. So to me, it's like, you know, I met you there. I met, you know, Paul Brisbane there. Some of my best fun matches were there. So like, yeah, that honestly, when you say that, it warms my heart because like not a lot of people talk about it positively. I'm not one of those people to look down on it.
Like it's there's a weird coincidence that actually made me want to bring that up because um, I coached AAU girls basketball for a few years ago, and I still keep in contact with a couple of those girls. And one of them went to Ballston Spa High School and had a summer job this summer. And she said she was like being a teacher or like a counselor essentially. She was like a camp counselor. I'm like, where's this camp? And she's like, the BACC. I'm like, girl, I know all about that building. And I was like,
Oh,
this. It brought back a lot of memories when she mentioned. I'm like, oh, I remember that. Yeah.
I, you know, a fond memory of that building. It was Memories, Moments, and Mayhem 2. It's when my partner Vigo and I won the In Your Face tag titles for the first time. And I can remember I got so emotional that I cried in the ring. We go in the back, we hug our opponents, and he grabs me, and I'm expecting him to say something nice, and he goes, "Where's the weed?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we're celebrating. Let's go." So we went out. We went out to
Oh,
another wrestler's van, and we're gonna. He's like, "Go have fun, bud." And I'm like, "Thanks." And so we celebrated by getting blitzed out of our minds, holding the tag titles, being like, we fucking did it. You know what I mean? Like, now, mind you, New York is legal now. Back in the day, it wasn't.
right.
So I'm not saying do illegal shit, kids, but it can be fun. So
Oh man, that's too funny. All right. I'm sure we'll touch on other wrestling stuff during the course of the show because that's just the nature of the animal. But let's just go back in time because I want to try to clarify something because I know we've never discussed this before, but I noticed it in your Facebook profile, and I just want to get clarification. So, were you originally from Virginia and then transplanted to Saratoga area, or are you originally from here and vice versa?
no, I was born in Portsmouth, Virginia. My dad was stationed in Norfolk. I am the only one of my siblings who was born in Virginia. What happened was uh, my dad had a vasectomy, and then the procedure didn't work because back in the day they used to just snip it and then let God have his way. And on a rare occasion, it would come back together, and woohoo, here I am. And what happened was my dad was finishing out his naval career, and the options were, I believe, Miami or Scotia, where they had Scotia Ball Spa, where they had the nuke program.
Yep.
And because my dad was from Cherry Valley, Sharon Springs area, my mom was from the Corinth, Lake Luzerne area. They had met in Ballston Spa when my dad was new in the Navy. I believe they kind of were like, let's bring the kids home. It's nice up there. It's beautiful. And I actually am the only one of my siblings that can say I started and ended school in one school district. All the others had to move around due to the military. I, from kindergarten until graduation, was had Luzerne Central School, and it was cool to only I only have a brief memory of my dad in uniform, and you know he laid such groundwork for the family, like 21 years in the Navy, and then his careers after that. For me, it was always like a sense of pride that, like, yes, I was from Virginia, but really New York has always kind of been home, so to
Hmm.
speak. because I don't really remember it. I think I have one memory of a beach, and it's like back there fuzzy in concussion land. So it's not like I vividly remember the day and all that.
Now you mentioned your father being in the Navy, so obviously that's interesting because you end up going to the Army. But we'll touch on that in a little bit. Um, growing up in the household of a Navy man, like, was that on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, how difficult was that upbringing for you?
For me, it was super easy. And the reason I say that is because I am the last of six. And then my parents also adopted my niece from my oldest sister. It was the 80s. It was a wild time for a lot of people, not to throw out a lot of stuff. But my sister was too young to have a kid, you know, and my parents did the best thing that they could, and they adopted my niece. And when we moved up to upstate New York, she was raised as one of us until at 14, she decided to go live with her mom. She had found out previous. I got the dad that worked swing shifts and worked as a plant manager for Foster Wheeler slash Wheelabrator in Hudson Falls. I did not get the military man. And in fact, that's kind of been a point of contention amongst my siblings is, we didn't see dad all the time. He was out to sea, you got to see him, you got the easy life. And I'm like, just so we're clear, being the last of six is not the easy life. Like, you realize I have to make up for all of your mistakes. So it's like, I don't want to say that it was easy. I got to see dad more. And I think because of that, I had a better relationship with my father than they did. And I don't want to say maybe some of them are a little upset about it, but it is a difficult life being a military kid. Like, those who are share similar experiences. And it's something that a lot of kids don't know. There are kids that come from divorce, certainly, and there are kids that come from fam. Yeah, I mean, my son is a blended family kid now, and I don't know what that's like. I had both my parents, but at the same token, I also didn't experience the loss of my dad being out to sea for 6 to 8 months at a pop. They did, so I could kind of empathize with their viewpoint on me getting more time.
Yeah, I can certainly see how that would be a real clash of experiences in a way. Um, do you feel like? I mean, obviously, that would lead to. I'm assuming from the sounds of it, that led to some disagreements of sorts between you and your siblings. Do you think that made? Do you think that made your relationship with them, like, has it gotten better since then? Is it still a bit of a strain? Is it, like, how is it now?
There are certain siblings that I do talk to. There are certain siblings that I have no communication with, and I'm okay with that. And the reason why is, look, you, I think people have this overwhelming urge to blame their parents for everything. My parents are the reason my life is so screwed up. Your parents do contribute. That is not saying that isn't a thing, but for me, there has to come a time where you're like, okay, at what point did you start making decisions for yourself that brought you down the path you're at? Some of my siblings would argue that because my dad was out to sea all the time, that they didn't get the attention they wanted, or that they found it difficult to watch the younger siblings get more time with dad. At the end of the day, that, in my opinion, to look at it from a glass half full perspective, that would make you want to be a better parent. That would make you want to be a better provider for your own children. It would make you decide maybe career choices that are more family oriented than selfish. Some of my siblings did go that way. Some of them did not. And it's one of those things where I can't speak for how my dad and mom raised you. I can only speak for how they raised me. They did the best that they could while managing six kids plus a grandkid. And with that being said, if they are upset, they being my siblings, that I got more positive things out of it, it's like, well, maybe if they weren't exhausted cleaning up your shit all the time, they would have been a little more heavy handed with me. But if they were more heavy handed with me, I wouldn't be the person I am today. So win win on that one.
So basically, they help set the bar low for you, and because you
They
exceeded
set Yeah, they set the bar so low. Like, I believe in my mind, I've always had this personal, private conversation with my parents, looking at each other, being like, "He's not in jail. No chicks are knocked up. He isn't dealing drugs, and we're not getting phone calls at 3 in the morning that our car is in a ditch somewhere. Give him all the Freddy Krueger movies and all the pro wrestling he wants. Just let him have it. Just pump it full. He wants a pay-per-view this week. Did he go to jail? Nah, buy that WCW pay-per-view. Let him have fun." You know,
There was like this a short mental checklist. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, go. Bye bye.
yeah,
So,
go have fun. Slap on
so
the ass. He's doing good.
by the way, just for a reference point, just to understand the difference in mentalities and approaches, what's the age gap between your oldest sibling and yourself?
I believe my oldest sibling is 53, because my dad just turned seven. God, he's going to kill me if I get this wrong. I believe my dad just turned 73. I believe my oldest sister is 53, and my closest sibling to me is 5 years older, if I'm not mistaken. I believe
So that
yeah.
puts your oldest sibling essentially flat for for the sake of providing landmarks, because I'm a guy and I like landmarks instead of actual 1.1 miles turn left here.
Yeah.
So your oldest sibling was essentially a freshman in high school when you came around.
Pretty much. Like, so you have to look at it through those lenses. Like, that is an entire generation and a half. I mean, and I don't know what it was like to grow up in that generation. I know my generation. And, I also didn't know very many kids or very many people my age. When I say I'm the youngest of six, they're like, holy crap, like, that's unheard of nowadays. But back in the 70s and 80s, it was nothing. Like, it was, big families were a thing. So,
No, I hear you. So let's get into um, your your formative years. You're growing up. You're going through middle school, going through high school. Did any kind of growing pains there that you felt might have been a little different than a regular kid? Um, Family or not family related? Anything of that nature?
yeah, I mean, as weird as this is going to sound, to be an adult, like, so, I have to put my kid into this. I have a 10-year-old, and he is on the spectrum. He would be Asperger's if Asperger's wasn't changed in the DSM-5. He very high functioning emotionally. He is, uh, a work in progress, I'd like to say. Developmentally, in some areas, he's a little bit behind. But from a young age and knowing his diagnosis, I would look at him and hear people say, "Wow, he's very much like you were as a kid." And I shrug it off and be like, yeah, maybe he's a little hyperactive. And it wasn't until some of the professionals that he was working with would actually talk to his mom and be like, "Oh, well, when was his dad diagnosed?" And there was kind of this, like, she looked and, what? And, yeah, but you don't see it. And she's like, no, like, what? So then, over the last few years and working with various therapists, um, I did not realize until I was well into my 30s that I was undiagnosed autism. So that, looking back at it as a kid, it made sense that I really didn't have friends growing up. I don't believe I had a real core group of people that I hung out with until like my freshman year in high school, because in my time frame of growing up, if you read comic books, if you liked pro wrestling at up to a certain point, and if you liked it afterwards, you weren't you weren't very popular. And, I was very much into my own world of dinosaurs and superheroes and all that other stuff. So looking at it from, Monday quarterback situation, I could see now why I had such a difficult time growing up, and not really connecting with anyone in my own peer group, but also having this wealth of knowledge that many kids my age would not know, and being able to talk to adults about stuff, but not being able to communicate with kids my own age. With that being said, once high school came around and I was able to communicate, and that's not saying I didn't like kids that were in my class. I just felt I was not able to really fully connect like a typical kid would. And it wasn't until high school where I got in with like metalheads and dudes who like Metallica and kind of like the pot smoking crowd, that I really found a good niche of guys that I hung out with and liked. And it was, you know, it it was a weird childhood. Also, the stuff that I was exposed to, I didn't really feel comfortable talking to other kids about. Like it's very difficult when, your brother is notoriously in trouble with the law, or whatever vices he was into, and everyone being like, well, that's his brother. And then kind of everyone doing the look at you. And it's like, I just want to read my fucking Superman comics. Like, I'm sorry that my brother, fuck you out of $50 worth of weed. My bad. And it was very difficult at times to kind of grow up in that shadow. But, it made me a better person because it taught me how to kind of become my own individual as an adult, to where now like that's not even something that people mention.
A quick sidebar: I can understand why people looked at you weird for being a wrestling fan, because given the time span, that was the new generation, and people still shit on the new generation to this day, so it's okay. Um, that 94 to 97 range is very
It was
weird,
rough.
and you were in middle school, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, not saying I didn't love Michael Jordan and all that, the Bulls, and I did try to get involved in stuff. My interests were not, when other kids were collecting upper deck basketball cards and trading Michael Jordan rookie cards and all this other stuff. I was reading like the death of Superman and the shit that's important now because it's ingratiated in pop culture, Avengers comics, X-Men comics. I was looked at as being strange because I didn't like the same stuff that other kids liked. Um, and even by kids themselves, like kids can be cruel, but knowing now, um, that I was, I guess, 20 years too early. I'd like to believe that. I was 20 years before the first Avengers film, so I was cool before it was cool.
Yeah, you were a little ahead of the Marvel and DC explosion, just a tiny
Exactly.
bit.
Just a smidge.
Yeah. People enjoyed Michael Jordan flying for dunks. You enjoyed Shawn Michaels flying for elbow drops. It's okay.
Yeah, with the mullet. If Michael Jordan would have had a mullet, I would have been
Then
way more into
maybe.
Michael.
All right, so let's fast forward, because you went to Hadley Luzerne, you graduated from there, but there's a small gap there, from what I understand. Like, you graduated, I believe, in 2000 from high school,
Yep.
and not to corner you on what your exact birth year and age are, but sorry. Um, but so you graduated in 2000, but you don't join the army until 2002. What was Did you try to go to college and then step away and decide the army was better for you? Or were you just taking time to figure things out and take a what I guess some people call now a gap year, essentially?
Yeah, I did not go to college. In fact, my parents tried to push me into college. My guidance counselor asked if I had any interest, and to be honest, um, I wish more kids would take a little bit of time off to kind of figure out what they want to do. Then maybe we wouldn't have a nation that's so indebted to like Sally Mae and shit. My thought was I just had enough of school. I was not a fan of it. And I got tired of hearing people be like, oh, it's different. It's like everyone says that. So what happened was I ended up stumbling into a tattoo artist apprenticeship with an artist in the area. And it was fun, but it didn't pay. It didn't pay a lot of bills. Like I was learning how to do it without a lot of pay coming to me. So there was a period of time where I was working for a few hours at a tattoo studio, like 4 hours a day. Then I would work pizza delivery from 4:30 to 10:30. And then I would work overnights at Cumberland Farms 5 days a week from 11 to 7, go home, get some sleep, and then go back to the tattoo studio. And during this time, like I had a group of friends that like we all followed Insane Clown Posse on tours, and like, it was being the best juggalo that you could be. And I was living just kind of this, yeah, laugh. I laugh at it now when I tell, because that's gonna come into play in a few minutes. Because remember Insane Clown Posse. So I had I was okay with my life. And then one Tuesday in September, I'm hungover downstairs. I'm living at my parents' house. I'm paying them like I think $50 a week rent. I'm living in the basement. Their whole thing was as long as you have a job, you can still live here. I had three of them. So to my parents, like, oh fuck, he's excelling. So I got yelled downstairs. My mom said, Dan, are you awake? And I'm like, eh. And she goes, you won't believe this. A plane to hit one of the towers. And I'm like, I woke up, ran upstairs. I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? And then there on the TV is a gaping hole in the side of one of the twin towers. And I can remember looking at her and saying, maybe the navigation malfunction, maybe the pilot had a heart. And as soon as I'm getting those words out, is when the second plane hit. And I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. And of course, everything shut down that day. Work called me and was like, "You're not coming in." And I went to a buddy's house. I went to a few people's houses, and about 3 days later, I'm sitting on my future ex-wife's floor at her parents' house, and we're watching the footage. And I'm like, uh, I got I got to do something. She's like, well, what do you want to do? I said, I, I I'm gonna enlist. And she just kind of looked at me like, what? I'm like, I'm gonna enlist. Like in my mind, looking back at it, and that moment was a changing point for me. But what was really the changing point, and if you're only listening to this podcast, or if you're watching this, Google Falling Man. And the reason I say Google Falling Man was that was the picture that made me enlist in the Army. And the picture is of a worker in one of the towers free falling to his imminent death. It was either burn in a building, die of smoke inhalation, or step into the unknown. And I thought to myself, that can never happen again. Like no one should ever see a photo like that again. And I left her house and I went home, and the following Monday I walked into a recruiting station, and I went through the process of enlisting in the Army, and I was in the delayed entry program until February. And February 20th, 2002 was my first initial enlistment date officially, because when you enlist, you do you raise your hand twice. You raise it at MEPS when you sign your contract, initially stating, "Hey, I'm enlisting," and then you do it a second time before getting on the bus to head to the airport to fly to whatever basic training you were going to. So I had a little bit of time before going. It wasn't like I just jumped in a plane and left that day. Had that happened, I'm sure life would have been way different for me. But I knew going into it what I was doing. And, even to the point where when I told my parents I talked to a recruiter, my mom was crying and my dad looked at me and he was like, if this is about college money, like we'll pay for your college. And I looked at him, I said, it's not about that. I mean, I it wasn't about that at all. My dad, you know, my dad was enlisted in the Navy during the very end of Vietnam, where they were still drafting people. My dad got his notification. It was either you choose a branch of service, or in 30 days you report for Army basic training. And my dad was like, "Well, I'm almost have a master's degree in mathematics. I might as well put it to use." And he went to the Navy. And I was a completely different generation. And for me, that one image changed my entire adult life. If that is a believable thing for anyone to hear.
No, I mean everybody, when they feel like they have a certain calling, everybody has that eye-opening moment. They don't forget. So, no, that totally makes sense. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because actually a question I was going to ask you was what your father thought of it. Um, so at this point, I guess the question becomes, before we get into your actual service time, was there any concern, because you mentioned having difficulties with what we've come to know now as your undiagnosed autism? Did you have any concerns about that when you were considering enlisting and going to the recruiter, or was that something where you were just like, this is my focus, I don't care what obstacles I face, I'm going to get through it and I'm going to do what I want to do?
Yeah, for me, my biggest obstacle in enlisting was finding a job. This is going to sound insane, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm well aware that this is something I've come to terms with over the years. Um, I was so fixed point on what is the job that will put me in essentially in a combat zone. Like, what is the one job that will have me see action? And I mean, I know that sounds crazy to hear, but you have to look at it from the perspective of a 19-year-old kid whose country just got attacked, and who, while sitting on the floor of his sweetheart's parents' house, was watching a man free fall to his death. And I, at that point, was able to communicate better with people. I was able to form relationships better. My biggest thought going into enlisting is, how do I juggle a life while being in? Because I knew you weren't doing military stuff 24/7, which comes back to the Insane Clown Posse, because my decision of where I would get stationed was based on an Insane Clown Posse tour shirt, because I'd heard about Fort Hood, Texas, and I looked on the back of a tour shirt and saw where the 4 dates were in Texas, where Fort Hood was, and was like, oh, I could go to 4 concerts in 3 days if I wanted to. Like, yeah, Texas. That is how I got there. And like my dad, when I told him that, was like, God damn it, you're special. Because a lot of dudes, if you're from New York, you have thank you for laughing. A lot of dudes,
Oh man.
if you're from New York, you'd want to go to Watertown. Well, I fucking hated snow. Why would I go to the Canadian border to be stationed? I want adventure and excitement, and Texas sounded like it would be it. And Fort Hood had great military units at it, so I rolled the dice. I think there's a part, and I have to mention that my uncle Chuck, my mom's dad, my mom's brother, served 2 tours in Vietnam as a Marine. And when he found out that I enlisted, my mom tells me that there was this big, deep sigh from him, and that he hoped that I would not come home the way that he came home. My uncle was one of those guys that came home and got spat at, that didn't get served at restaurants. Um, Despite how things are now in upstate New York, where they're really conservative, back in the day, Saratoga was way more conservative than it is now. And him getting served at a restaurant in Vietnam era being a Marine, it was tough, and he was not treated very well. So I'm I'm lucky to say that never happened. But the stuff still gets real at a point.
Yeah, I like to think that the generation we're living in now is not quite as like we're very polarizing on social media, but as far as like face to face interaction, I like to think we're not quite as polarizing as the Vietnam War made things in the '60s and '70s. Because like it was like there was no shade of gray from at least from everything you see and hear. Like it was either you were you were either enlisted or related to somebody enlisted, or you were protesting, or somebody supporting what the protesters were doing. Like there was no shade of gray. It was A or B. And nowadays, I feel like there's a little more shade of gray. So I think that helps. I'm assuming that probably helps things out as well in that regard.
It does, and the country at times, it's up until recently, it's been 20 years of sustained war on the global war on terror. And there are people that I've talked to who are totally anti-war, and I respect that. I do. I know people that are stupidly like, give me a gun and a can of Monster. I'll go over there and take care of the Taliban. And it's like, all right, sit down, Chuck Norris. You're not that cool. But the thing that gets me is they always say, while we might not agree with the policies or the president, we support you guys. And I would like both if possible, because regardless of the president I served under, I still respected the office and I still respected the people around me. And and like I said, regardless of the policies, although I might not have liked all of them, I certainly understood where they were coming from on their viewpoint of something.
At the same time, you're not just defending like as much as you might want to disagree with a politician's policies, you, what you're doing is about more than just their policies. It's about 300 million people.
Yeah. And I understand that now we are, the soldiers, servicemen. I say soldiers, but servicemen, for the generation that was the global war on terror. We represent, I think, only 0.1% of the population, and that's shocking when you think about World War II and even Vietnam. I mean, you have to think that there's 0.7% of Americans are veterans, and only zero point 0.1 of that really is global war on terror veterans, because we just kept getting recycled over and over. I mean, I did 2 tours overseas. I know guys who've done multiple more than me. I know some that were one and done. Like, I can't, that was fine. Thank you. Check, please. And, you know, regardless of that, it's a small community within a small community. And I believe that those young guys are a bit more vocal at times than maybe the generation of Vietnam. But the Vietnam generation, they were under fire for that. And I mean, the country sent them. They answered the draft. They went overseas, and they got. I think it was a society's displeasure with the war that they were in. They just didn't know where to focus it. And instead of focusing it on the politicians that they brought into office, they focused it on the service members who went overseas and came home scarred, both physically and mentally. And when they did that, they created quite a rift where, you know, at least speaking from the people that I know, there are some older veterans that still are harboring ill feelings towards the general population about the way that they were treated when they came home.
Now you mentioned you did 2 tours in Iraq. One was from what I read up, one was '04,
Mhm.
and the other was '08 into '09.
Yes.
And you eventually end up um, being out of the military by 2011. Does that sound correct?
Yep.
Okay. So over the course of the 9 years that you were in the Army, what, did you encounter any difficulties? Well, I should say, what kind of difficulties did you encounter with your mental health during that time, particularly when you were abroad, because you're in a totally different continent, let alone state or country. Um, you know, you're around. You're obviously in your unit, but you're around people that are completely foreign to you, speaking a foreign language that I'm assuming you don't know. I mean, it's got to be a wild time for you when you're overseas and serving your country like that.
So the way and I'm very brutally honest. I believe that over the years, that's one of the things that when it comes to certain aspects of my military career, I'm not afraid to talk about. '04 was one of the best and worst experiences of my life. It definitely changed who I was, and actually, it changes how I talk to people today. Um, in that I got to experience the best of people, and I also got to experience the worst of people. Without giving too much of the dark stuff, you see shit, you experience shit, stuff happens to you, and there are some things that you just can't shake, and you can try your hardest, but you just can't shake them. When you're in the situation, you um, you learn to just suck it up, keep going forward, deal with it later. That's kind of like that was the mantra in that time frame. Like, hey, we got a job to do, worry about it later. Worrying about it later was your emotional state. Worry about it later. And for me, '04 was, I was in Baghdad. So I am in the heart of everything. This is when Muqtada al-Sadr was, setting himself up in Sadr City and going into politics while also being responsible for roadside bombs. This is when Mahmoud al-Zarqawi was starting to become a name within Iraq. This is when you started having the sophistication of attacks on soldiers was getting better. Um, this is a time frame when, you could go down the wrong road and that's it, sayonara. You could be out in the middle of the city and shots are getting fired at you, and because it's crowded in the middle of the day, you don't know where the fuck it's coming from. And the thing about it is, you're so dialed in that when you come home, for me, I experienced my first real bouts of post-traumatic stress disorder, what I would believe would become post-traumatic stress disorder. I'd like to say probably about 5 months after coming home. My ex-wife and I have had brief conversations in the past where she was like, it was like having a complete stranger come home. Like it was like living with a stranger. I was angry all the time. I was, unfortunately, I became addicted to prescription painkillers due to a partial tear in my unhappy triad. And I also, my alcohol increased. So I started becoming someone that even I didn't recognize. But herein lies the problem. You can be a alcoholic pillhead, but as long as you keep it under a tight enough lid, you could you can fool people. You really could. As long as I showed up on time where I needed to be, I didn't smell like booze, I was shaved and my uniform looked presentable. People didn't think there was any fucking thing wrong. And the moment I realized that I needed help was my alcohol intake became a 12 pack of Guinness, half a bottle of Jägermeister, and 3 Vicodin a night. I would pass out on the couch. I wouldn't even make it to bed. And we one morning were told to report to Division Main, and we would be going to one of the gyms for a briefing. And we march. And mind you, this is now me at 22. I am what I feel looking back is a time bomb waiting to go. And we get to this gym on Fort Hood, and we are in formation, and we are told that we are going to be going in, we're going to be filling out some questionnaires, and we're going to be answering questions. My company commander said, if you value your career in the military, you will answer no to everything, and then we will release you back to your sections. Okay, whatever. Cool. And this is a captain in the Army telling us that we better answer no to all of these questions. So I get in and I sit in this little kiosk thing that's set up in this gym, and I start reading the questions. And I'm like, fuck, this is me. Like, this is all about substance abuse problems and nightmares and disconnect and marital problems. And this is me. This is me. So I started answering yes, especially with the marital problems. Like I love my wife, you know, and I wanted to be a better person. And I just didn't, none of it clicked. You know, like you don't think at 22 you've got these problems. So I answer the questions, you hand it to the person, you go sit down in the bleachers, and if they called you back, you went behind a curtain and talked to someone. They called me, and I was the only one who they called. And so you know that walk when you're the only person and like everyone's kind of staring at you like, hmm, hmm. So I go behind the curtain and they're like, are you really doing this every single night? I'm like, yeah. It's worse on the weekends because I wake up drunk. And they're like, do you want counseling? And like they were almost like shocked that I said, you know, that I answered everything correctly or honestly. And it was like, yeah, I'd love some fucking counseling actually, because I'm getting out of the Army at the end of the year. I'd kind of like to be normal going home to my friends. And I got a phone call that afternoon and I got my ass chewed out because, of course, they pass along to your command who is now going to be seeking counseling. And I got chewed out because I answered yes. Like, how fucking dare I say yes to needing help? Because there at that time there was this whole like just shut the fuck up and do the job and worry about it later kind of thing. But it wasn't worrying about it later because it was directly affecting my personal life. It was affecting my friendships, it was affecting my marriage, it was affecting everything, my health. So I went and saw a counselor once a week, and you know, all of a sudden it was, well, you know, we're going to the range. Roberts, you're going to stay in the office. Why? Yeah, you just stay in the office. Well, they didn't have any more faith in me because I'd answered yes to questions. So it affected my career in that. And I'm like, all right, I'm getting the fuck out. You know, my wife at the time wanted to come home to New York. I figured coming back home would be great. I got out of active duty in February of 2006 and figured I'll find my way. And it wasn't too long after that that basically everything broke down. I was having flashbacks. You know, I was on a litany of medicines, you know, different SSRIs and antipsychotics. I was on Ambien for sleep, but Ambien, as some people might not believe, very hallucinogenic. If your body doesn't, your body, when people like jumped on Roseanne Barr for her fuck up a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago on Twitter about being on Ambien, I felt that because I'd been on Ambien and shit, you are not in control when you're on Ambien. Like you can fucking you can be awake but not there. Um, so my flashbacks got worse, and basically my life went to shit, and that's when uh, the first suicide attempts came into play. because I'm in upstate New York. My marriage is falling apart. None of my friends really can connect to me because in that time of going overseas, I aged like 30 years in comparison to some of them. And it was a very lonely place. Like it was a very dark, lonely place. And, there are some people that get to that place and they go a route that they can't turn back from. Some people get hard into drugs. Some people, unfortunately, we service members commit suicide. I was, I took a bottle of Ambien one night and tried to chase it down with Guinness. Luckily, I threw up on myself. I didn't know, so I rejected it. There were days where I purposely drive my Jeep like super fast after drinking and just being like, if I fucking yank the wheel and hit that tree without my seatbelt on, that's a good way to go. Um, there was one time where I was benching and I had the bar above my head, and I'm like, if I just slip, it'll break my neck and people think that it was an accident. Um, it got fucking dark, got real dark. What pulled me back was I was sitting there one day and I was like, the only thing that ever kept me at least in check was if I was in uniform. So when you're in the military, you have your 8-year contract. 4 years or 3 years of it is active if you're an active duty guy, but then you have inactive reserve time. I decided to cash in my inactive reserve time and do 4 years, what was, a good amount of time um, in the reserves. And I ended up hooking up with a reserve unit out of Utica, New York, which was along the same job that I did, same house, different side of the house in Baghdad. And that still didn't fix the problems. I'd gone to the VA, they weren't very much help. I basically was still in self destruct mode, but being in uniform just slowed self destruct mode down. And, you know, I I did another tour overseas with post traumatic stress disorder. I did another tour overseas knowing that my mental state was already in question. The only thing that was great was that the team I was with knew it and they knew how to use me properly. And that I could say to this day, like Sergeant Clark and Captain Reed and Mongo and Stotler were like saving graces because they knew my problems, but they were able to help focus me to be able to do the mission. Now, when the missions were over with and I was home, that became an entire different thing to the point where in December of 2009, I was self admitted the week of Christmas to the behavioral health unit in Glens Falls Hospital. I finally had hit the proverbial rock bottom. And it was to the point where everyone who was around me not only feared for my own safety, but I had become so angry at the world that I was willing to lash out at it. And unfortunately, at that time, um, I was really good at lashing out. And I say that tongue in cheek because, I was not the person that everyone knows now. People know me as this, you know, positive person, very motivational, wanting everyone to reach their peak. There was a time where if you looked at me wrong and I was just intoxicated enough, I was probably going to choke you out for no fucking reason and then go back to drinking. That was the kind of person I was. And looking back at it now, it 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 shames me to admit that that's how it was. But had I not been that person, I would not have ended up in Glens Falls Hospital and I would not have become the person I am now.
So once you depart from the that unit at Glens Falls Hospital, where did things begin to change? Where did things start to go in a positive direction from you at that point?
So the doctor that I was seeing during my 72-hour hold at Glens Falls Hospital, his name was Dr. Ferber, and he had experience with veterans. And he left the VA because of the bureaucracy of the VA and how they didn't really go out of their way to help vets like they should. He had a book by Dr. Edward Tick. He's from Albany. I gotta look this guy up and shake his hand one day. The book is called War in the Soul. And while I'm sitting there on the first day in this behavioral health unit, Dr. Ferber gives me this book. And he's like, you know, read it, tell me what you think. And I'm looking at this big ass book. I'm like, I don't know how long I'm here for. I might as well. And it took 100 pages for me to finally hit the stride of the book to where it talks about how war is soul injury and how you're never going to heal unless you heal the soul. And I know that sounds really hokey, but it did fucking wonders. Just opened up this whole door. I read the whole book in one day and then had more communications with him. And at the last day I was there, he looked up, he goes, you'd be really good at this. And I'm like, what? And he goes, you being a counselor for veterans, you'd be really good at this. And I looked at him like, I am in a mental institution right now around Christmas. And you're like, I think you'd be great at this. I'm like, the fuck out of here. In my mind, I'm like, the fuck out of here, man. So I get released, and my unit, I let them know that I was institutionalized. And all of a sudden it was, okay, what do we do? Like there was almost this moment of panic where it's like, okay, this is going to be just like first cav all over again. Shockingly enough, no, because they all knew it. They all had seen it. They were just happy I was getting help. But then the thing that opened up doors was guys who were suffering from post-traumatic stress started talking to me about their problems and where to go and what I did. And I told them, I'm like, you don't want to go as far as I went. Like, please don't get to how dark I got in life. But I started pushing guys towards that. And I was working a full-time job, and I ended up having a kid, and I got out of the army, and I started in this weird, wacky world of pro wrestling. And then I went into SUNY Adirondack because I was having some problems with my VA benefits, and I needed to file some paperwork and stuff. And Harry Candy, the rep, looked up and he was like, "Have you ever thought of going to college?" And I just found out I got passed up for a promotion at work. And I stopped. I was like, yeah, yeah. He goes, "Oh, well, I've got your DD 214 here. Let's put in your stuff and get your GI Bill started." And I'm like, okay. And a month and a half later, I got the paperwork saying that I was 100% for the GI Bill, full coverage, all this shit. And I was like, so this psychology thing may be real. And so the fall of 2013, I ended up going to SUNY Adirondack. And at that, like maybe a semester or two before, they'd started a veterans club. I got involved with that. Next thing you know, I'm on the board of trustees. Student senate. We're doing great. I'm giving speeches, and we're doing all this cool stuff. And truth be told, my perception, me thinking about how they thought of me, forced me to have to be better in certain areas. And not saying I didn't have major character flaws, because they all have it, but working within psychology and knowing, studying it and learning about my disorders, and then I was going to counseling regularly during my time in college also, because here's something that sucks. It is very difficult to find a counselor that's good. It is even harder when you have a full-time job and a baby at home and family commitments to try and chop out time. At least when I was in college, I was able to do that more frequently and get a lot of help. I've been in and out of counseling since about 2005. I've had some great experiences with counselors. Some counselors, I'm with them a couple of times. I'm like, this doesn't mesh. You need to be able to mesh with a counselor. And you know, uh, to me, mm, eventually it came down to owning my disorder and owning the things that happen and being able to say to myself, it's okay that you're fucked up. It's okay that your life did not turn out as rose petaled as some. But at the same token, if it wasn't for those hardships that I went through, if it wasn't for that time, I don't honestly think I'd be the person I am today. I can say that with 100% um, certainty. Would I be a marathon runner? No, no, I wouldn't, because chances are, if I didn't already put myself through a lot of physical and mental strain in the past, I don't think I'd be mentally tough enough to do the stuff. As far as professional wrestling goes, no, I would have never become a professional wrestler, because if it wasn't for being at one of my soldiers' weddings in 2010, I wouldn't have met Timmy I, who guided me to JP Black's school in Hudson Falls. So because of the military, I got to meet the guy who ushered me into the world of pro wrestling, and I met you and lots of other people. You know, uh, I also have a very different perspective when it comes to certain things that I think some call it fortitude, some can call it mental hardening, mental calloused mind. I the things that I've noticed affect my generation don't necessarily affect me the same way, because waiting 15 or 20 minutes in line at the grocery store, that's fine. You know, Driving down a highway that is littered with bombs and knowing that for the next like 40 minutes your asshole is going to be like puckered up and like, it's watertight. I'd rather have the 20-minute wait behind the person lacking deodorant in Walmart versus, spending 24 hours on a flight line waiting to go home just to be told, oh, there's no flight. Go back and wait another 24 hours. Like, my level of what I'm able to deal with is a lot higher. It, I think, with that being said, that that gives perspective that only someone who's seen the world from these lenses can say. Do I think it's for everyone? No, but for me, it's it. I've said this before. You know, everyone's got a demon. Some people's demon is a little bit bigger, and it sits on their shoulder for a lot longer. You have one of two choices: either you can succumb to your demon, or you can tell that motherfucker, you're my bitch, and I'm going to use you when I need to use you, and then you're going to go sit quietly until I need to use you again. PTSD is my demon. Alcoholism is my demon. Prescription pills is my demon. This is something that risk-taking behavior and sexual encounters are a demon for me. There's lots of demons. I rolled mine all into one, and some days are better than others. Some days I'm able to keep that motherfucker under wraps. Some days he wins. Some days he loses. But it's just having the fortitude to keep fighting and finding reasons to fight. That's what's important.
You finished your associates at SUNY Adirondack. You're still working on your bachelor's at SUNY Plattsburgh, correct?
Yeah, I finished that up in 2018.
Okay, so you finished up your bachelor's. Are you trying to work your way towards Dr. Dan, or is this
That is
something
come.
you're still thinking about?
That is something that I definitely would like to do. My thing is, I in order to achieve the doctor, I know I've got a lot of years. I'm 39 now. It's not in the realm of plausibility. Right now, the thing that I like to do is, and I'm not trying to sound conceited when I say this, I like to use what I do positively for other people. And one of the things that my psych degree has allowed me to do is mentally be able to test my limits, know how to then present that to other people. One of the weird things that happened along this world that I live in was I got into Spartan racing and training at a specific facility in Queensbury, the gym 518. And this weird thing happened where people, and I didn't know it. I would just show up, put in my effort, and go home. But people began looking at me in a certain way, and it wasn't until my friend and really is a mentor. He's my I like to call him. He's my Phil Jackson, and I'm his Dennis Rodman because you know for outward appearances and behaviors, I am more Dennis Rodman than I am a Scottie Pippen or a Michael Jordan. Like
Makes sense.
everyone wants to be Michael Jordan, but when it came to getting dirty, who the fuck did you call on? You called on Rodzilla. You called on the worm. Um, but he's let me know that like people watch what you do and they are inspired by it. And I'm now leading teams of participants in these races. And it is extremely gratifying for me to be able to pull the best out of people in a very shitty situation. Now, mind you, it's not combat, which thank God it's not combat. But I have women and people that I run with that this is some of the hardest stuff physically they've ever attempted to do. And they're doing it willingly and they're doing it with a smile and they're doing it because I tell them they can do it. I believe in them and I wholeheartedly do. And because of that, and because of the energy that I put out to them, they are able to find it within themselves to complete these races. We just did a 7.5 mile race this past Saturday. And I mean, we had people that were in their late 50s running. We had grandmas running. We had, school teachers. Our youngest person, I think, is 17, and she placed first in her age group out of every fucking participant that. So it's like I hear that and it's like, thanks, Dan. You're the one that got me out here doing it. And she's showing me her bloody hands, and I'm just like, you fucking savage. Like you inspire me. Like it's not the other way around. But it's because of them and it's because of my background with psychology that I'm able to appreciate this kind of stuff more. And I'm also able to use it. I think that a lot of people get stuck behind the idea that they need to have a bunch of alphabet letters behind their name in order to make a difference in someone's life. Sometimes, honestly, it's just crawling in the mud next to someone and just looking at them being like, you fucking got this, you fucking beautiful bitch. Like, you got this. And like, the realization in their eyes where they're like, yeah, I do. Thanks. Like, like drawing it out of them. Um, you know, I would eventually like to see myself finishing up and getting my master's and working with veterans to some capacity. It's, one of those things where, like I mentioned, they like to see letters behind your name. And so far I've got BA, that's to me, BA is cool for now.
I'm gonna I'm gonna save my realization for the very end when I wrap things up, but I do have a couple of things I want to just touch on quick. You look back at how you were when you first came out in 2011, and you compare that to now. Now you say you still battle day to day, and I understand that I battle day to day myself on a lesser extent because I haven't gone through necessarily the experiences you've gone through. Would you say comparing yourself even to 2016 version of yourself, not even 2011, 2016 version of yourself 5 years ago, would you say you're more at peace with everything you've gone through and done compared to then? Or is it still an
Uh,
ongoing battle for you?
some days are better than others. With the recent events in Afghanistan, I would be lying to you if I didn't say that put a lot of my life choices into question. Uh, I, you know, it it it, it does put the question in your mind: was it worth it? You watch the Taliban take over. You watch the fact that they're already persecuting women in positions of power who opposed them years prior. Um, you see all your hard work and the hard work of others fall by the wayside, and you do question it. To answer your question, if I were to compare myself to 2016 Dan, I am more at peace, and even 2011 Dan, I'm more at peace now because I didn't want to admit my faults then. Now I'm able to openly say, this is who I am. This is what I am. I am a result of these factors. Instead of running from it and trying to hide who I am, I'm more open about it. That being said, I think that I have more good days than I do bad now. But it's still a thing that like I mentioned earlier, it's still the demon that I have to wrestle with. And some days are better than others. Some days I feel unbreakable, and there are other days where I I can't be near society because of how I feel. It's knowing who I am, and I think I know myself better now than I ever have before.
Now, this question is jumping the gun a little bit, but I'm going to provide a hypothetical for you. Let's say we get to the year 2030, and Logan walks in and he says, "Thinking about serving my country." How would you react to that?
That's actually a conversation that's come up recently because Logan recently discovered what Navy SEALs are. Um, and he's a 10-year-old boy, and he was at a pool with an old neighbor, and she said, "Oh, you swim like a Navy SEAL would." And he was like, "What's a Navy SEAL?" And she couldn't exactly explain it. She was like, "Ask your dad." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So, me being the great dad that I am, I introduced him to David Goggins. Um, and then he was like, "Well, what's this documentary that David Goggins watched that made him want to be a Navy SEAL?" So we found it on YouTube, and he watched it. And he's just looking at me, and he's looking at this, and he's like, they they look like they're so happy right now. And I'm just looking at him like, you and I have different perspectives on what we're watching. And I brought it up with his mom, and I was like, just so we're clear, he now knows what Navy SEALs are. He he was asking questions, and she was like, "You said good things, right?" And I said, "Of course, I'm not going to talk shit about the SEALs, like, you know." And she said, "You know that one day they're going to start taking people with autism." And I said, "I know, because it's 1 in 56. Clearly, I made it through without any problems." Um, and she was like, "What are you going to say that day?" And if I had it my way, I would make a deal with him. And the deal would be at least get your associates first and then go in, because I'd rather him have college under his belt and responsibilities instead of just jumping the gun. Because, especially with something like the military, I'd want my son to do something that he would love. And heaven forbid if he were to say, "I want to go be a Navy SEAL," I would want him to understand the gravity of being something like that. He's my only son, so there is a lot of hesitation with wanting to send my only son into a combat zone, knowing how it affected me. But my son loves this country as much as I do, and I would. It's tough to say, but I would be so proud if he did go that route. But it's not something that I would push on him. It's kind of something that he would have to discover on his own. My old man never pushed me towards it. I won't do the same, but I would make sure my kid was prepared if that ever came up.
I'm sorry if you're watching on YouTube, you probably see me kind of um. I'm gonna explain why I'm getting like this. Um, so, and this is something you didn't know before the show, so this is just kind of educating you. Um, I have one of my brothers who moved in with me October, something like that, of last year. Um, Similar path as you. Graduated from high school from Burn Hills. Uh, Went into the army. Didn't He didn't do the three jobs, the three jobs at once while living with his parents like you did before joining, but he went into the army. Did serve in Afghanistan at one point. Um, Came back and, for lack of a better phrase, hearing your story, um, hearing everything you said the last like 40 minutes, it's like I'm talking right to him, like I'm talking to Chris 2.0. And I knew generally speaking your background, but just like hearing your experiences, hearing everything that you're talking about from when you came out of active combat, and just I don't know, man, it's you're killing me right now. Um, so, whew, all right. So let me put this out there then. Um, if you look back in time and you had that younger Dan filling out that paperwork that day, is there anything you would tell him back then that you know now that you wouldn't have known back then?
Uh, I would have told him, save your money. As cool as action figures and comic books are, try and save a little bit more money.
Right.
Um, I think, I've been asked this question by people like, would you have done it? Would you do anything differently? And it's a nice fun game to sit here and talk about, the what ifs, and like live a
You know what?
multiverse kind of life. And I guess if I had anything to say to that kid, I would just tell him, like, there's going to be dark times. There's gonna be some lonely, lonely dark times. And it's okay, because at the end of those dark times, uh, you're gonna have a kid that thinks you're a superhero. And for me, uh, I I am I wake up every day in awe of the fact that I got a kid that's so cool. And if uh, if I did one thing differently, that might fuck it up. And I I am so proud to be his dad, and I'm so proud that he thinks of me as a superhero. If my having to deal with this on a day-to-day basis is what I have to do for him to have the best life, then I would gladly do it every single day. And to me, that's what really matters.
Brother, we're both getting into the waterworks. I didn't expect this
Yeah,
tonight.
I know. It's like,
Um, I can see it. I got you. I got you. Um, ah. Listen, I always had tremendous respect and admiration for you. Just knowing offhand that you had served our country, and we've talked a little bit, you know, outside the ring, just because we traveled a little bit together. I still remember, I think it was me, you, Vigo, and Ricky for one show out in I think it was one of those World of Hurt shows out in Vermont, out in
Yes.
was it Rutland maybe,
Yep.
or something like that. Yeah. Um, I still remember Brutus the Barber getting stark ass naked, and I didn't really need to see that. And but a
All I'm
couple
saying
times
is
actually.
Vigo and I got his weed, so that's all I have to say about that. I mean,
Oh,
that was a good payday.
it's good. It's good trade off. Good trade off. You get to see somebody new that you really didn't want to see nude, and you got his weed. That's a good trade off, I think. Um, I gotta look at you nude for 10 seconds to get weed. Sure, that's a good trade. Um, listen, folks, if you don't get it, it's pro wrestling. You're never gonna understand it unless you're part of it.
Nope.
Oh man, I can't even imagine the stories we could get into, but that's not what this podcast is about. Um, whew, all right, I regained my composure. You good? All right, man. I don't even know how to properly outro this. I just know I'm immensely grateful for you, not just coming on, but being whew, as open and direct and revealing as you were. You didn't have to be. You really didn't have to. But knowing you, you wouldn't have done it any other way anyways. So, yeah, I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on. I just want to say this, not for show, just because I really mean it. I've always had much love and respect for you. I love you like a brother, and doors always open. You know that. We've talked about this before. Doors always open. I don't give a shit about what time it is, when it is, where I am. You know where I am. All right, man?
Thank you. I love you, brother.
Love you too, man. I appreciate you. Former Army Sergeant Dan Roberts, most popularly now known as father of 10-year-old Logan. Who knows? That kid's gonna be a star someday. I don't know how he's gonna be a star. He's gonna be famous someday.
Yeah, I see him chasing rattlesnakes and pulling Steve Irwin, being like, "Crikey, look at this one!" It's like,
oh, crikey!
It's like, all right, kid, simmer down.
Oh man, he's gonna be Steve Irwin with Jesse the Body Ventura Navy SEAL mentality and
even shorter shorts.
And Dan Roberts looks in hand-me-down wrestling gear to be a second generation. It'll be a third-generation military man, a second-generation wrestler. We'll put it that way.
I feel bad for the first person that pisses him off in a locker room.
And knowing my sorry ass, I'll probably still be there to call his matches and we're ring announced for him, so it's okay. I'll be like, listen, kid, don't make me get your dad. I got you. Relax.
I would be proud of that.
I love it. But until then, that's another 15, 20 years down the road. It's okay. Dan, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon, all right, man?
Absolutely.
All right. That was episode 13 of The Space Between Your Ears, presented by Godzilla Media. Sponsored by Mohawk Honda, Johnstone Supply. Y'all know what time it is. It's time to say goodbye. Don't forget, if you have any comments about the show, you know what it is. The Twitter handle's at Brian Cady. I've spelled my name out enough as it is. If you don't know how to spell it, just check out the show description. I'm done doing that. But if you have any long form shit you want to say, or if you want to share your mental health journey, by all means, brian.cady@godzillamedia.com. And if you don't know how to spell that, that's also in the show description. For the meantime, for Dan Roberts, I'm Brian Cady. So long. We'll catch you next week.